this year.
Okay, Nainal Kidwa, I'm going to leave it at that. Many thanks for your time here at NDTV. Always good to talk to you. And it gives me great pleasure equally to welcome Adi Godrej, Chairman of the Godrej Group now here on NDTV. Mr. Godrej, many thanks for your time. It's a busy day for you, and I'm going to get straight to it. First, a stock take, particularly from a consumption stimulation in the budget. What has it delivered to stimulate consumption? There is, of course, the income tax piece for the middle class, which certainly should do its bit.
Yes, I think there were many provisions which will help consumption, particularly, as you said, the lower income tax on lower income people. However, the big consumption improvement to my mind will come from rural India, because the schemes announced for rural India were very good, especially on the electrification front, and also the introduction of contract farming through a new bill to be introduced. So all those are very good developments. Generally, this budget is very growth oriented, and it will add to GDP growth in my mind.
Okay, Mr. Godrej, I'm going to ask you the tough question first, and then we'll talk about the positives and how they could play out. What was the big disappointment? I mean, the amount of talk there was about a lower corporate tax rate, and now I know it's come through, but for a very small and medium enterprise piece or segment, are you disappointed about the corporate tax rate and the fact that there's no change?
A little bit, because they've been talking about it for several years now, and to talk about it and not do anything is not a very good thing. And lower rates of corporate taxes would have yielded them greater revenues in my mind. But the good thing they've done is to extend the carry forward of MAT credit to 15 years, which will be helpful to the corporate sector. I think also there was another negative, which is the higher rates of income tax on incomes beyond 50 lakhs. That also to my mind is a negative, because higher rates of taxes very rarely yield more revenues. They tend to go against the yield of greater revenue because they tend to affect growth and development.
Contract farming, you really hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's a really interesting idea out there. You have some understanding of this. What would you hope to see play out? I mean, this is just an idea which has been touched upon in the budget, but what are the ideal contours of this once it begins to fall into place?
Now let's see what kind of legislation they introduce, but because of small land holdings in India, agricultural productivity is negatively affected. So if you allow contract farming, and some states have already introduced it well, especially say Punjab, but contract farming generally in India could add a lot of value to rural incomes, it could add a lot of value to agricultural growth, it could add a lot of value to certain crops which can then be used for food processing. So overall that's a good development, but generally the expenditure they want to make in the agriculture sector and rural sector I think will help considerably. As it is, it's a good year for rural India. Agricultural growth will be good. Both the Kharif and Rabi crops are likely to be good, and agricultural growth can be further increased with these government expenditures.
Indeed, the FY18 rural farm and allied sector outlay is at an all-time high. So that's an important theme that you've mentioned. I'm just wondering whether the sting of demonetization is out of the way, and given that we've got this budget now, and from a Godrej perspective, because you've got your finger on the pulse of consumers pan-India. So how do you see business going forward? Because the moment I bring it down to the Godrej lens, we can get a real sense.
I think already the negative effect of demonetization in November was to a considerable extent overcome in December, and it's even more overcome in January. The re-monetization has gone quite well. I think the negatives of demonetization were exaggerated. The actuals will be much better, and with this budget, especially with rural demand likely to increase with this budget, I think the negatives of demonetization will quickly be overcome. And a lot of the positives of demonetization will make themselves felt. So I feel the GDP growth in 17-18 will be very good, especially with the GST coming in from July.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one final question, and that is, would you have liked to see more on GST, perhaps even a more firmer sort of rollout date commitment coming through in the budget, or is that best dealt with by the council and it would be inappropriate to address here?
Well, he has already announced it. He has mentioned it on a couple of occasions. He mentioned it in the budget speech also twice, that the GST would be implemented. So I think it didn't make any more sense of making further announcements.
Fair enough. Adi Godrej, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Many, many thanks for your time here on NDTV. Good to get that assessment of Budget 2017, a budget of many firsts. We have Finance Minister